The courthouse smelled of old wood and bitter coffee, the kind that had been sitting in a pot since dawn. I sat in the back row, fingers knotted together in my lap, watching dust motes drift through the afternoon light that slanted through the tall windows. My stepmother's perfume, expensive, suffocating, reached me even from 3 rows ahead, where she perched beside my stepsisters like a crow watching carrion. I shouldn't have come. Father had been dead for 2 weeks, and I already knew what his will would say. Men like him, pragmatic, distant, remarried to a woman who smiled with her mouth but never her eyes, didn't leave fortunes to daughters who reminded them of ghosts. My mother had died when I was 7, and with her went whatever softness my father might have possessed. He'd filled the void with Eleanor within a year, and she'd brought her own daughters, polished and sharp-tongued, who looked at me like I was a stain they couldn't quite scrub away. The lawyer's voice droned on, nasally and bored. Eleanor received the estate, the sprawling house with its manicured gardens, the one mother had loved, where she'd planted roses that still bloomed without her. My stepsisters, Victoria and Caroline, received trust funds that made them gasp and clutch each other's hands in theatrical delight. I watched their performance with the detachment of someone who'd learned long ago that wanting things only made their absence hurt more. And to my daughter, Sarah, the lawyer continued, adjusting his glasses, I leave the northern property. Silence fell like a stone into still water. Then Eleanor laughed. It started as a chuckle, then built into something brighter, crueler. Victoria joined in, her hand over her mouth in mock apology. Even Caroline, usually the quieter of the two, smirked behind her designer handbag. The northern property, Eleanor repeated, her voice dripping with amusement that echoed off the wood-paneled walls. Oh, Richard, even in death you had a sense of humor. The lawyer cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Mrs. Hartley, perhaps? That land is worthless, Eleanor announced to the room, though only a handful of people remained. Distant cousins who'd come for the spectacle, a few of my father's business associates. It's been in the family for generations, sure, but it's nothing but wilderness. 50 acres of forest that borders the Thornridge territory. No electricity, no roads, practically uninhabitable. The property taxes alone will drain whatever pitiful savings she has left. My face burned, but I kept my expression neutral. I'd learned that skill at 14, when Eleanor had first critiqued my appearance at a dinner party, pointing out how my pale blonde hair looked washed out next to her daughter's carefully highlighted brunette locks. I'd learned to be invisible, to fade into wallpaper, to exist without taking up space. That's assuming she can even keep it, Victoria added, examining her nails. Didn't someone try to buy it last year? Father refused, of course, but now... She trailed off meaningfully. The lawyer shuffled his papers. Miss Hartley, if you'll just sign here to acknowledge receipt of the deed. I stood, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Every eye turned to me, and I felt the familiar shrinking sensation, the desire to disappear. But I walked forward anyway, my second-hand dress, black, borrowed from a colleague at the library where I worked, swishing softly. My fingers trembled as I took the pen. The deed was yellowed with age, the writing elaborate and old-fashioned. 50 acres in Thornridge Forest, property line adjacent to protected wilderness. My father's signature at the bottom, dated just 3 months ago. Had he known he was dying? The doctors had said the heart attack was sudden, unexpected. But looking at this document, I wondered if he'd felt death approaching. If this had been his way of... What? Apologizing? Punishing me one last time? Such a generous inheritance, Eleanor cooed as I signed. I do hope you enjoy your wilderness adventure, dear. Try not to get eaten by wolves. More laughter. I kept my head down, taking my copy of the deed, folding it carefully into my worn purse. The lawyer gave me a sympathetic look that somehow made everything worse. Pity was just cruelty in a softer mask. I was halfway to the door when Eleanor's voice stopped me. Oh, and Sarah, I'll need you out of the house by the end of the week. I'm sure you understand. We'll need your room for guests. Perhaps you can camp on your new property. Her smile was sharp enough to draw blood. The spring air outside tasted like rain and new leaves. I walked 6 blocks to the bus stop, my heels blistering in shoes that had never quite fit right. The deed felt heavy in my purse, heavier than paper should feel. 50 acres of nothing. An inheritance that was really just another rejection. Another way of saying I didn't belong. Had never belonged. Would never belong. The bus was crowded with evening commuters, and I stood pressed against the window, watching the city give way to suburbs, then to the sprawling estates on the outskirts. The Hartley house, no, Eleanor's house now, sat behind iron gates and ancient oaks. I'd grown up there, but it had never been home. Home had died with my mother, buried alongside her in the cemetery I visited every Sunday with flowers I could barely afford. My apartment was a studio above a dry cleaner's, and it smelled perpetually of chemicals and steam. I set my purse on the narrow counter and pulled out the deed, spreading it flat under the single overhead light. The map showed the property's boundaries, a rough rectangle butting against something marked simply as Restricted Territory, Thornridge Packlands. Packlands. The word sent an unexpected shiver through me. Everyone knew about Thornridge, though most pretended not to. It was one of the oldest werewolf territories in the region, heavily forested and fiercely protected. The pack rarely interacted with human settlements, maintaining a careful distance that everyone seemed content to respect. There were stories, of course, travelers who'd ventured too deep into the woods and never returned, strange howls on full moon nights, massive shadows glimpsed between trees. My mother had told me about them once when I was very small. We'd been in the garden, and I'd asked why we never walked in the forest beyond our property line. She'd knelt down, tucking a strand of my pale hair behind my ear, her touch impossibly gentle. There are old things in those woods, sweetheart. Old rules. The wolves keep to themselves, and we keep to ours. But they're not monsters. They're just different. Like how roses are different from daisies, but both are flowers. Do you understand? I'd nodded, though I hadn't really understood at all. I just wanted her to keep touching my hair, keep looking at me with eyes that saw me clearly, loved what they saw. She'd died 3 months later, pneumonia, sudden and vicious, and my father had never spoken of the wolves again. Had sold off the portions of our original family land that bordered Thornridge, keeping only that northern property, the one he'd now left to me. I made tea I didn't drink and sat by the window, watching rain begin to fall. By the end of the week, Eleanor had said, 5 days to pack a life that barely existed, to figure out what came next. I could sell the land, probably, though Eleanor was right that it wasn't worth much. Certainly not enough for a new apartment and first and last month's rent. I could try to live there, though the thought of 50 acres of wilderness with no electricity made my stomach twist with anxiety. Or I could do what everyone clearly expected. Fail quietly, disappear completely, prove that I was exactly as worthless as my inheritance. The rain intensified, drumming against the window. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. And for just a moment, so brief I might have imagined it, I could have sworn I heard something else, something that sounded almost like a howl, low and resonant, carrying across the miles between the city and the forest. The sound made something in my chest ache, though I couldn't have said why. Loneliness, maybe, or recognition. The feeling you get when you realize you've been holding your breath without knowing it, and suddenly remember how to exhale. I pulled my mother's photograph from my purse, the edges soft from years of handling. She smiled from the past, young and vibrant, standing in a garden that no longer belonged to me. I traced her face with one finger, wishing desperately that she could tell me what to do, how to survive this latest loss, where to find the strength to keep going when everything felt impossible. But the photograph stayed silent, and the rain kept falling, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the city lights, those ancient woods waited with secrets I couldn't begin to imagine. I fell asleep at the window, the deed still clutched in my hand, and dreamed of running through forests I'd never seen, of freedom that tasted like pine and earth and wild things. When I woke, my neck aching from the awkward position, dawn was breaking pale and cold over the rooftops. 3 days later, I stood at the edge of my inherited property with everything I owned, packed into 6 cardboard boxes in the trunk of my battered car. The forest rose before me like a wall, dense and primordial, the trees so tall their tops disappeared into morning mist. The air smelled of decomposing leaves, and something else, something vital and alive that made my skin prickle with awareness. There was no house, no cabin. Nothing but a rusted metal post driven into the ground, marking the property line, and beyond it, wilderness that seemed to stretch into forever. I'd been a fool to come, but I had nowhere else to go. I was unloading the first box when I felt it. That sensation of being watched, of eyes on my back. The forest had gone suddenly, unnaturally quiet. No birds, no rustle of small creatures in the undergrowth. Just silence, heavy and waiting. I turned slowly, my heart climbing into my throat, and saw him standing at the tree line, not 20 feet away. He was the largest man I'd ever seen. Though man felt like an inadequate word, power radiated from him like heat from summer pavement, and his eyes, pale gold, almost amber, fixed on me with an intensity that made my knees weak. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and there was something about the way he stood, perfectly still, yet somehow coiled, that made every instinct scream predator. But it was the others that made my breath stop entirely. They emerged from the trees like shadows gaining substance, 7, 8, 9 of them, all male, all massive, all watching me with those same unsettling golden eyes. They moved with a fluid grace that was utterly inhuman, forming a loose semicircle that cut off any escape route. The pack. It had to be. The Thornridge wolves in human form, on what was supposed to be my land. The first man, their leader obviously, something in the way the others oriented toward him made that clear, took a step forward, then another. I should have run. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, but my legs had turned to stone, and all I could do was stand there, clutching my box of books like it might somehow protect me. He stopped just a few feet away, so close I could smell him. Pine and rain and something wild that made my head spin. His gaze moved over me slowly, assessing, and I felt stripped bare under that examination, every weakness exposed. "You're the Hartley girl," he said finally. His voice was deep, roughened, like gravel in a silk bag. Not a question, a statement. I managed a nod, not trusting my voice. The one who inherited this land, again, not a question. He knew, of course he knew. The wolves probably knew everything that happened in these forests, every change in ownership, every human who dared come too close. Yes, I whispered. I have the deed. It's legal. I'm not trespassing. We know what it is, he interrupted, and there was something almost amused in his tone. Richard Hartley's last joke, giving his unwanted daughter the one piece of land that borders our territory, the one piece we've been trying to acquire for 3 generations. My stomach dropped. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't. Of course you didn't. He tilted his head, studying me with those unnerving eyes. You're practically shaking. You came here with nowhere else to go, didn't you? No plan. No idea what you were walking into. Heat flooded my face. Somehow having him see through me so easily was more frightening than the physical threat. If you want the land, I can sell it to you. I'm not here to cause problems. I just need time, he finished. A place to hide while you figure out what to do with a life that's falling apart. The accuracy of it stole my breath. I stared at him, this dangerous stranger who somehow saw everything I'd tried to keep hidden, and felt tears prick my eyes. I blinked them back furiously. I would not cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Something shifted in his expression. Too quick to read. He turned his head slightly, and the others melted back into the forest as silently as they'd appeared. All except him. My name is Dominic, he said quietly. I'm the Alpha of Thornridge. And you, Sarah Hartley, have just become very, very interesting. The way he said my name, like he was tasting it, sent electricity down my spine. And in that moment, standing in the morning mist with nothing to my name but 6 boxes and 50 acres of wilderness, I had the strangest, most terrifying thought. My life had just changed forever. The boxes stayed in my car for 3 days. I couldn't bring myself to unpack them, to admit that this impossible situation was real. Instead, I slept in the back seat, curled under a thin blanket that smelled of the lavender detergent I'd used in my old life, when I'd had a washing machine and 4 walls and a door that locked. The forest pressed in around me at night, alive with sounds I couldn't identify. Rustlings and distant calls, the crack of branches, and sometimes, carried on the wind, voices that were too low and resonant to be entirely human. I knew they were watching. The wolves. I felt their eyes like phantom touches on my skin, tracking my movements as I rationed the granola bars and bottled water I'd brought. On the second morning, I woke to find a deer carcass 20 feet from my car, fresh and still warm, the killing wound clean and precise. A message, though I couldn't decide if it was a threat or an offering. I didn't touch it. By evening, it was gone. The library where I'd worked, where I'd spent 5 years reshelving books and helping patrons find obscure references, had let me go 2 days before my father's funeral. Budget cuts, they'd said, though I'd seen them hire someone new the following week. Someone with connections, with a family name that meant something. I'd cleaned out my desk in silence, carried my few personal belongings to my car, and felt the last thread tying me to normal life snap cleanly in half. Now I sat on the hood of my car, watching dawn break through the canopy in shafts of gold and green, and wondered what my mother would think of me. Would she be proud that I'd survived this long, or disappointed that survival was all I seemed capable of? The snap of a branch made me freeze. Dominic emerged from the tree line, as if the forest had simply exhaled him into existence. He wore dark jeans and a shirt that did nothing to hide the powerful lines of his body, and in the morning light, I could see details I'd missed during our first encounter. The scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the silver that threaded through his dark hair at the temples, the way he moved with absolute confidence over uneven ground. He carried something in his hands, a basket, woven from what looked like willow branches. "You're still here," he observed, stopping a careful distance away, close enough to speak normally, far enough that I didn't feel immediately threatened. A predator's calculation, I realized. He was managing me like I was a skittish animal. The thought should have offended me. Instead, I just felt tired. "I have nowhere else to go," I said flatly. No point in pretending otherwise. He'd seen through me from the beginning. He set the basket on a flat stone between us. "I brought food. Real food. You can't live on granola bars and stubbornness." I looked at the basket, then at him. "Why? Why what? Why are you helping me?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended. "You said my father tried to sell you this land, that your pack has wanted it for generations. I'm trespassing on the edge of your territory with a piece of paper that says I have the right to be here, and you—" I gestured at the basket. "You're bringing me breakfast?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, brief and unexpected. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? Someone like your stepmother, someone who'd show up with lawyers and demands, who'd see this land as a commodity to exploit." He tilted his head. "But you showed up alone, with everything you own in 6 boxes, and you've been sleeping in your car for 3 days because you're too proud or too scared to ask for help. Which is it, by the way?" "Both," I admitted before I could stop myself. His smile widened slightly, and I caught a glimpse of teeth that seemed just a bit too sharp. "At least you're honest. What's in the basket?" "Bread, cheese, apples from the trees on our land. Some smoked meat." He paused. "The deer was from Cade. He's young and thought he was being helpful. I told him leaving dead animals by your car might be misinterpreted." Despite everything, a startled laugh escaped me. The sound felt rusty, unused. "Tell Cade thank you, but this is better." Dominic's expression shifted, something warm replacing the careful neutrality. "You can tell him yourself. He'll be insufferable if he knows he made you laugh." The basket smelled incredible, yeasty bread and sharp cheese and the sweetness of ripe fruit. My stomach cramped with hunger, and I realized I'd barely eaten in days. Pride warred with need, and need won. I slid off the hood of my car and retrieved the basket, hyper-aware of how close I had to get to him to do so. He smelled like the forest, like morning air, and something uniquely himself that made my pulse quicken inexplicably. "Thank you," I said quietly, retreating to a safer distance. He nodded once, then surprised me by sitting down on the ground, his back against a massive oak tree. The posture was casual, non-threatening, as if he had all the time in the world. "Tell me about your mother." I nearly dropped the bread I'd been unwrapping. "What?" "Your mother. Richard Hartley's first wife. She died when you were young, didn't she?" 7, I said automatically. "I was 7. Why?" "Because I'm trying to understand why a man would leave his daughter a piece of land that's essentially worthless to humans, but invaluable to us. Either it was malice or..." He trailed off, watching me with those unnervingly perceptive eyes. "Or what?" "Or he knew something. Your mother. What was her maiden name?" "Winters. Catherine Winters." The name felt sacred on my tongue. Something precious I rarely spoke aloud. She grew up somewhere north of here, I think. She never talked much about her family. Dominic went very still. "Winters." The way he said it made my skin prickle. "You know the name." "I know a lot of names. Old names." He stood in one fluid motion, and suddenly the careful distance felt like a gulf. "Sarah, has anything ever happened to you that you couldn't explain? Moments where your instincts seemed too sharp, where you knew things you shouldn't know?" My mind flashed to a dozen small incidents. The time I'd known my father was coming home early and hidden before his car pulled into the driveway. The way I could sometimes sense storms hours before they arrived. The dreams that occasionally came true in small, strange ways. I'd always dismissed them as coincidence, as pattern recognition, as anything but what Dominic's question implied. "No," I lied. He studied me for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling he knew exactly what I wasn't saying. The Winters family had ties to several packs in the Northern Territories. Distant ties, diluted over generations, but ties nonetheless. If your mother carried that blood, even thinned, it might explain why you can stand here without running. Why my pack isn't reacting to you the way they would to any other human this deep in our territory. The bread turned to ash in my mouth. "Are you saying I'm... what? Part wolf? No, you're human, but bloodlines remember, even when we forget. Your mother might have been trying to tell you something, leaving you with knowledge she thought you'd need." He moved closer, and I forced myself not to step back. "This land. It's a bridge, Sarah, between our world and yours. Your father might have been cruel, or he might have been giving you the only gift he knew how, a place where you could be safe, where old blood might count for something." "I don't understand any of this, I know." His voice softened. "But you're going to have to try, because you can't live in your car forever. And winter comes early in these mountains. You need shelter, and the only shelter for 50 miles in any direction is on my land." My heart hammered. "You want me to come onto your territory? Into your pack?" "I want you to survive. The rest..." He shrugged. "The rest we'll figure out." It was insane. Everything about this was insane. I should have said no, should have gotten in my car and driven until I hit a city where I could disappear, where I could start over with nothing and somehow make it work. But I looked at the forest pressing in on all sides, at the deed in my pocket that was worthless except as kindling, at the 6 boxes that contained a life I no longer had, and I looked at Dominic, this dangerous stranger who'd brought me food, and spoke of bloodlines, and offered shelter, when he had no reason to help me at all. "Why?" I asked again. "Why do you care if I survive?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost rough. "Because I've been alone for a very long time, Sarah. And you smell like autumn rain and old magic, and something I thought was extinct. You make my wolf restless in ways I don't entirely understand. And maybe that should scare me. But instead..." He met my eyes. "Instead, I think your father left you this land, knowing you'd have to come to me. Knowing that the only way you'd survive was if I chose to protect you, and I'm choosing to protect you, but I need you to choose to trust me." The intensity in his gaze made it hard to breathe. Trust. Such a simple word for something I'd forgotten how to do. Eleanor had taught me that trust was for fools, that everyone wanted something, that vulnerability was just another word for weakness. But standing here, with the morning sun filtering through ancient trees and a basket of food that someone had prepared for me, for no reason except that I was hungry, I felt something crack open in my chest. Something that had been locked tight since my mother died. Okay, I whispered. Dominic's expression transformed. Relief, yes, but something else too. Something that looked almost like wonder. Pack your boxes, he said. I'll send Kate and the others to help. We have a cabin on the western edge of our main compound. It's small, but it's weatherproof and has electricity. You'll stay there. I can't pay rent. I'm not asking you to. He turned to go, then paused. Sarah? For what it's worth, I don't think your father was being cruel. I think he was trying to save you the only way he knew how, by sending you somewhere you might finally belong. He disappeared into the forest before I could respond, leaving me standing alone with breadcrumbs on my fingers and a strange, terrifying hope blooming in my chest. 20 minutes later, 4 wolves emerged from the trees. Young men who introduced themselves as Cade, Finn, Rowan, and Silas, each carrying themselves with that same predatory grace. Cade was exactly as I'd imagined. Eager, bright-eyed, barely containing his excitement at being useful. Finn was quieter, observant, while Rowan and Silas moved with a synchronized ease that suggested they'd known each other forever. They loaded my boxes into a truck that appeared seemingly from nowhere, making jokes and asking careful questions that felt like tests. Where had I worked? The library. What did I like to read? Everything. Was I scared? Terrified. Did I know how to cook? Passably. Cade grinned at that last answer. Good. Dominic's cooking is awful. We've been surviving on meat and potatoes for months. He can hear you, Finn said dryly. I know. Cade's grin widened. He knows I'm right. The easy camaraderie between them made something in my chest ache. This was what family looked like, I realized. Not the cold politeness of my father's house or Eleanor's cutting remarks disguised as concern, but this, teasing and trust and the security of knowing you belonged. The cabin Dominic had mentioned sat at the edge of a clearing, small but beautifully made, with a wraparound porch and windows that caught the afternoon light. Inside, it smelled of pine and something herbal. Sage, maybe. There was a bed with clean sheets, a small kitchen with a functioning stove, a bathroom with running water that seemed impossible given our location. Dominic built most of this himself, Rowan said, setting down my last box. About 5 years ago. We've been using it for guests, but honestly, we don't get many visitors. I can't imagine why, I murmured, and was rewarded with surprised laughter. After they left, I stood in the center of my new space and tried to process what had just happened. This morning, I'd been homeless and hopeless. Now I had a roof over my head and 4 new acquaintances who seemed genuinely pleased I was here. And Dominic. Complicated, intense, impossible to read Dominic, who'd looked at me like I was a puzzle he needed to solve, a mystery that mattered. I unpacked slowly, finding places for my few belongings. My mother's photograph went on the small table beside the bed. Her smile seemed different here somehow. Less sad. As if she'd been waiting for me to find this place, these people. As if she'd known all along where I'd end up. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in days, I heard them. The wolves. Not distant anymore, but close, moving through the forest just beyond my windows. Their presence should have frightened me. Instead, I felt strangely comforted, as if I'd been wrapped in invisible arms that promised safety. Tomorrow I'd have to figure out what came next. How to live among them, how to earn my keep, how to navigate a world where the rules were written in instinct and hierarchy I barely understood. But tonight, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I fell asleep without fear, and dreamed of golden eyes watching me from the darkness, not with hunger, but with something that felt dangerously close to hope. I woke to the sound of voices outside my cabin, low, urgent, edged with tension. Dawn hadn't fully broken yet, the sky still caught between night and morning, that hushed blue-gray that made the world feel suspended. I pulled on jeans and a sweater, my hands clumsy with sleep and sudden anxiety, and cracked open the front door. Dominic stood in the clearing with 6 others, all in human form, but radiating that barely contained energy that marked them as other. One man I didn't recognize, older, with silver threading heavily through dark hair and scars that suggested a violent past, was speaking in a voice that carried despite its measured tone. Can't just bring a human into the heart of our territory without consulting the council. You know the laws, Dominic. You wrote half of them yourself. The laws exist to protect the pack, Matthias. Dominic's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Sarah isn't a threat. You don't know that. This from a woman with auburn hair pulled back severely, her pale green eyes sharp as broken glass. She's Richard Hartley's daughter. That family has caused us nothing but problems for 3 generations. She's also Catherine Winter's daughter, Dominic countered. Or have you forgotten what that name means? The woman, I thought her name might be Elena, from something Cade had mentioned, stiffened. Rumors, old stories. Are they? Dominic turned to face her fully. You felt it when she arrived. We all did. The land responded to her presence. The land responds to many things, Matthias said carefully. That doesn't mean... It means we pay attention. Dominic's tone sharpened. It means we don't turn away someone who might be exactly what we've been waiting for. What you've been waiting for, Elena corrected. The rest of us are content with how things are. I should have stayed inside, should have pretended I hadn't heard any of this. But my mother's voice echoed in my memory. Something she'd said once about cowards and consequences, about how hiding never solved anything. So I stepped fully onto the porch, letting the door swing shut behind me. 7 pairs of eyes snapped to me instantly. The weight of their attention was physical, pressing against my skin like barometric pressure before a storm. I'm sorry, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I didn't mean to cause problems. If my being here is creating division, I can leave. I don't want to. No. Dominic's voice cut through mine, absolute. He moved toward me, and the others shifted slightly, a pack responding to their alpha's movement. You're not leaving. This is your home now. Dominic, Matthias started. She stays. Dominic reached the porch steps, and something in his posture made it clear the discussion was over. Anyone who has a problem with that can bring it to me directly. Otherwise, she's under my protection, and pack law applies. Are we clear? Silence hung heavy. Then, one by one, the others dipped their heads in acknowledgement, some more reluctantly than others. Elena was the last, her expression tight with disapproval. But even she yielded eventually. They dispersed into the forest, leaving Dominic and me alone in the growing dawn. He climbed the porch steps slowly, and I saw exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, tension in his shoulders. You didn't sleep, I observed. Neither did you, apparently. He leaned against the porch railing, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. How much did you hear? Enough to know I'm causing problems. Enough to know that whatever you think I am, not everyone agrees. I wrapped my arms around myself. What did you mean? The land responded to me. He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. Our territory is old, ancient, in ways humans measure time differently. There are places where the boundary between worlds is thin, where magic, for lack of a better word, still exists. Most humans walk through these places and feel nothing. But those with certain bloodlines. He turned to look at me directly. When you arrived, every wolf in a 5-mile radius felt it, like a bell ringing in a frequency we didn't know we could hear. The trees leaned toward you. The earth settled under your feet like it recognized you. My mouth went dry. That's impossible. Is it? You've been dreaming about these woods your entire life, haven't you? Even before you inherited the land, even when you were a child, I had. Dreams of running through forests, of belonging to something wild and free. I'd always dismissed them as products of an overactive imagination, of a lonely girl desperate for escape. But now, with Dominic watching me with those knowing eyes, I couldn't maintain the lie. Yes, I whispered. Your mother knew. She might not have understood exactly what she was, but she knew enough to plant seeds, to make sure that if you ever needed sanctuary, you'd know where to find it. He pushed off the railing. Come with me. There's something I want to show you. Now? Now. I should have hesitated, Should have asked more questions, demanded clearer answers, but I was learning that time with Dominic existed outside normal constraints. There was now, and there was later, and waiting never seemed to serve any purpose except to build anxiety. I followed him into the forest. We walked for perhaps 20 minutes, moving deeper into territory that felt progressively older, more primal. The trees here were massive, their trunks wide enough that 3 people couldn't link hands around them. Moss grew thick on the north sides, and mushrooms clustered in fairy rings that seemed too perfect to be natural. The air itself felt different, charged, aware. Dominic finally stopped at the base of a tree that dwarfed all the others, its roots breaking through the earth in gnarled arches that created small caves and hollows. He placed his palm flat against the bark, and I felt rather than heard something shift. A recognition. An acknowledgement. "This is the heart tree," he said quietly. "Every pack territory has one. It's the anchor point, the place where the boundary between worlds is thinnest. Only pack members can find it. The forest itself hides it from others." He looked at me. "Put your hand on the trunk, next to mine." Every instinct screamed warning. This felt sacred, important in ways I didn't understand. What will happen? I don't know. That's why we're here. Honesty, at least. I stepped forward, acutely aware of how close I'd have to stand to him to reach the trunk, close enough that our shoulders brushed, that I could feel his breath stir my hair. I raised my hand, hesitated, then pressed my palm against the ancient bark. The world exploded into sensation. I felt the forest's heartbeat, slow, ancient, patient. Felt the roots diving deep into earth that remembered when mountains were young. Felt the pack moving through the territory like blood through veins, each member a distinct presence, a unique note in a complex harmony. And underneath it all, something older still, a presence that had no name but recognized me anyway, welcomed me like a child returning home after a long absence. My knees buckled. Dominic's arm caught me around the waist, steady and sure, pulling me against him as the sensations overwhelmed. I could feel him too, not just physically, but somehow deeper, the complexity of his nature laid bare. The human and the wolf, existing in constant negotiation. The loneliness that ate at him like slow poison. The responsibility that weighed heavier than mountains. The fierce protectiveness toward his pack that was both his greatest strength and his most dangerous vulnerability. And beneath all of that, something raw and new and focused entirely on me, a connection forming, threads weaving between us that felt inevitable as gravity. "Breathe," he murmured against my ear. "Just breathe. It'll settle." I dragged air into lungs that had forgotten how to work. Gradually, the overwhelming flood of sensation narrowed, becoming manageable. I could still feel the forest's presence, still sense the pack at the edges of my awareness, but it no longer threatened to drown me. Dominic's arm was still around my waist. I was still pressed against his chest, feeling his heart beat strong and steady. Neither of us moved. "What was that?" My voice came out shaky. Confirmation. He sounded shaken too, which was somehow reassuring. "The territory accepted you, claimed you even." That's... He trailed off. "That's what?" "Unprecedented. In all my years as Alpha, I've never seen the heart tree respond to someone who wasn't born into the pack." His arm tightened fractionally. "Sarah, whatever bloodline you carry, it's strong enough that this land recognizes you as belonging. You're not just human anymore. You're something else. Something in between." I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt a strange sense of rightness, as if something that had always been slightly out of alignment had finally clicked into place. What does that mean? It means Elena and the others can protest all they want, but the territory itself has made its choice. Your pack now, in every way that matters except the transformation. He finally stepped back, though his hands lingered on my shoulders. It also means you're in more danger than I initially realized. The shift in his tone made my stomach drop. What kind of danger? The kind that comes from being rare, from being something other packs will want to control or eliminate. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. There are wolves who believe humans with your kind of bloodline should be killed before they can pose a threat. Others who'd want to use you to breed that magic back into pack lines that have lost it. And still others who'd simply take you because they could. Because having a human who can touch the territory's heart, would be a powerful symbol. The casual way he discussed my potential murder or abduction made bile rise in my throat. So, bringing me here was the safest option of many bad choices. At least here I can protect you. Out there, alone, you'd be vulnerable to anyone who sensed what you are. His golden eyes held mine. I won't let anything happen to you, Sarah. I promise you that. The intensity of his declaration should have felt like pressure. Instead, it felt like the first solid ground I'd stood on in years. We walked back to the cabin in silence. But it was a different silence than before, charged with awareness, with the invisible threads that now connected us. I could feel him even when he moved out of sight behind trees, could sense his presence like a warm pressure at the base of my skull. Cade was waiting on my porch, bouncing on his heels with barely contained excitement. You felt it, didn't you? The forest? We all felt you connect. It was like the territory took a deep breath and sighed. Finn said it was the weirdest thing he's experienced in 10 years, and Finn doesn't admit things are weird easily. Despite everything, I smiled. It was intense. Intense? Cade laughed. That's one word for it. Silas said it felt like the earth moved. Rowan threw up, though he's pretending he didn't. And Elena, he caught himself, glancing at Dominic. Elena will adapt, Dominic said firmly. Everyone will. This is how things are now. Good. Cade's grin widened. Because we're having a gathering tonight, and Sarah's officially invited. It's tradition when someone new joins. We feast, we tell stories, we make them feel welcome. Or, we try to. Sometimes it's more chaotic than welcoming, but the food is always good. Cade, Dominic started. She should come, Cade insisted. The pack needs to meet her properly, not just sense her from a distance, and she needs to meet us. Besides, if she's going to live here, she might as well jump in the deep end, right? He had a point. Hiding in my cabin wouldn't make integration easier. It would just postpone the inevitable awkwardness. What time? Sunset. We gather at the main hall. It's the big log building about a quarter-mile north of here. You can't miss it. Cade hesitated. Fair warning. We're loud. We eat a lot, and some of us have terrible manners. But we mean well. I think I can handle terrible manners. That's the spirit. He bounded off the porch with that endless energy, calling back over his shoulder, wear something comfortable. Things tend to get messy after the second round of drinks. When he disappeared into the trees, I turned to find Dominic watching me with an unreadable expression. You don't have to go if you're not ready. I think I'll never be ready, but he's right. Avoiding everyone just makes it worse. I tried for a smile. How bad can it be? You're asking the wrong question, but there was warmth in his voice. The question isn't how bad, it's how overwhelming. My pack is intense when they want to be, and they're going to be very curious about you, about what you mean. What do I mean? He was quiet for a long moment, then, I'm still figuring that out. But Sarah, his voice dropped, becoming something softer, more dangerous. Whatever this is between us, whatever the territory recognized, it's not nothing. I need you to understand that. My heart hammered. I understand. Do you? He climbed the steps until we were eye level, until I could see gold flecks in his irises, could count the silver threads in his dark hair, because I'm trying very hard to be honorable here, to give you space and time and choices. But when you touched that tree, when the forest claimed you, I felt it too. Every instinct I have is screaming that you're mine to protect, mine to keep. Mine. And I'm alpha enough to usually trust those instincts, but I'm also human enough to know that you deserve better than a possessive wolf with control issues. The confession hung between us, raw and honest. I should have stepped back, should have put distance between us before this became something irreversible. But I'd spent my entire life stepping back, making myself smaller, accepting less than I deserved because asking for more felt impossible. What if I don't want better? The words escaped before I could stop them. What if I want exactly this, complicated and intense and terrifying? Something blazed in his eyes, triumph and relief and hunger all mixed together. He reached up slowly, giving me every chance to move away, and tucked a strand of pale hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered against my cheek, rough and warm. Then you're braver than I gave you credit for, he murmured. And we're both in trouble. He left before I could respond, disappearing into the forest with that preternatural grace, leaving me standing on my porch with my heart racing and the certainty that I'd just crossed a line I could never uncross. The rest of the day passed in a strange blur. I tried to distract myself with unpacking, with organizing the cabin, with anything that didn't involve thinking about golden eyes and promises, and the feeling of belonging that had bloomed in my chest like wildfire. But when sunset finally came, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, I found myself walking north toward the main hall with my pulse hammering and my hands clenched at my sides. The building Kate had described loomed ahead, massive logs fitted together with obvious skill, windows glowing warm in the gathering dusk. I could hear voices inside, laughter and conversation that sounded so normal it was almost jarring. I stood at the base of the steps, gathering courage, when the door swung open and Finn appeared. He studied me for a moment, then nodded once. Approval or acceptance, I couldn't tell. "They're waiting," he said simply. "Don't let them intimidate you. Most of it is theater." "Most of it?" His mouth quirked. "Elena's legitimate, but the rest are just curious." He held the door open. "Coming?" I climbed the steps, crossed the threshold, and walked into a room full of wolves. The conversation died instantly. Dozens of faces turned toward me, some curious, some wary, some openly assessing. I felt exposed, pinned by their collective attention, every inadequacy highlighted. Then Dominic stood from where he'd been sitting near the massive stone fireplace, and the room's focus shifted to him. "This is Sarah," he said, his voice carrying easily. "The territory has claimed her as pack. Anyone who has an issue with that can take it up with me directly." The challenge in his tone was unmistakable. No one spoke. Good. He moved through the crowd toward me, and people parted automatically, responding to his authority. When he reached me, he placed a hand on the small of my back, a gesture that was both protective and possessive. "Welcome home, Sarah." And despite the staring eyes and uncertain future, despite Elena's tight-lipped disapproval visible across the room, and the magnitude of everything I still didn't understand, I believed him. This was home. Finally. The gathering lasted until well past midnight, and by the end, my cheeks ached from smiling, and my mind spun with names and faces I'd never managed to keep straight. True to Cade's warning, the pack was loud, boisterous in ways that felt foreign to someone raised in Eleanor's house of careful manners and cutting silences. Here, people laughed with their whole bodies, argued passionately over trivial things, and touched each other with casual affection that spoke of deep bonds. Rowan had appointed himself my unofficial guide, pointing out key members between bites of venison that had been roasted over an open fire pit behind the hall. "That's Marcus. He's second in command, Dominic's right hand. Been with him since the beginning. The woman with the dark braid talking to Matthias is Sage. She's our healer. Knows more about herbs and medicine than anyone I've ever met. And those three causing trouble by the drinks table are the youngest, twins named Ash and River, and their cousin Bryn. They're harmless, mostly. I watched the dynamics unfold, the way people oriented around Dominic even when he wasn't actively leading. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, stopping to listen to concerns, settling minor disputes with a word or a look, touching shoulders and exchanging quiet words that seemed to carry weight. This was what leadership looked like, I realized. Not the distant authority my father had wielded, but something more intimate, more demanding. Elena kept her distance, though I felt her gaze track me throughout the evening. When our eyes finally met across the room, I didn't look away. Whatever her reservations, I was here now, and running had never solved anything. It was Sage who eventually approached me, carrying 2 cups of something that smelled of honey and spices. "You look overwhelmed," she observed, offering me one of the cups. "This will help. It's mead. Our own recipe. Not too strong, but enough to take the edge off." I accepted gratefully, the warmth of the cup seeping into my cold fingers. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who knows what to look for." She settled beside me on the bench, her presence calm and grounding. I remember my first gathering after I joined the pack. I was so terrified I hid in the kitchen for 2 hours, You're not born pack? No. I came from a smaller territory down south about 8 years ago. Dominic offered me sanctuary when my old pack had issues. The way she said it suggested complications I shouldn't pry into. It took time to adjust, to find my place here, but I did. And you will too. The kindness in her voice made my throat tight. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm also here to warn you. She took a sip of her mead, her expression thoughtful. Dominic is a good alpha, fair, strong, protective, but he's also been alone for 5 years, since his mate died. The information hit like a physical blow. Mate. The word carried weight in wolf culture. I knew enough to understand that. A bond deeper than marriage, more permanent than any human connection. Sage must have seen something in my face because she continued gently. I'm not telling you this to hurt you or to suggest you shouldn't care for him. I'm telling you because you deserve to know what you're walking into. Dominic lost Leanna to a challenge from a rival pack. She was killed in his place, took a blow meant for him. He's carried that guilt for 5 years. And it's made him careful, cautious about letting anyone close. But the way I stopped, unsure how to articulate the intensity of what I'd felt, the connection that seemed to bypass rational thought. I know. We all feel it. The way he looks at you, the way the territory responded. It's unprecedented, and that scares people like Elena, but it also gives us hope. She reached over and squeezed my hand briefly. Just be patient with him, and with yourself. Nothing about this situation is normal, and normal timelines don't apply. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance. The doors burst open, and a wolf I didn't recognize stumbled in. Young, bleeding from a gash across his shoulder, his eyes wild with panic. The room went silent instantly. Dominic was moving before anyone else processed what was happening, catching the injured wolf before he collapsed. Sebastian, what happened? Patrol, the wolf gasped. Northern boundary. They came out of nowhere. At least a dozen, maybe more. They're testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses. His eyes found me across the room, and something like fear flashed across his face. They were asking about her, about the human with old blood. Ice flooded my veins. Every eye in the room turned to me again. But this time the curiosity had been replaced with something harder. Assessment, calculation, fear. Who? Dominic's voice was dangerously quiet. What pack? Couldn't tell. They masked their scent, moved like ghosts, but their leader... Sebastian swallowed hard. He said to tell you that what belongs to the territory is of interest to many, that you should consider sharing before someone decides to take. The threat hung in the air, ugly and unmistakable. Dominic's expression went absolutely cold, the kind of cold that suggested violence held in check by sheer force of will. Get him to Sage. Now. Marcus, Matthias, Finn, with me. Rowan, Silas, secure the perimeter. Cade, take Sarah back to her cabin and stay with her. Dominic, I started. Not now. He cut me off, already moving toward the door. Cade, don't let her out of your sight. Then he was gone. Marcus and the others following, and I was left standing in a room full of wolves who were looking at me like I was a bomb about to explode. Cade appeared at my elbow, his earlier playfulness replaced by grim determination. Come on, we need to go. The walk back to my cabin felt endless. Cade stayed close, his body positioned between me and the dark forest, his attention split between the path ahead and the shadows on either side. I could feel his tension, the way every muscle was coiled and ready. This is my fault, I said quietly. I shouldn't have come here. I should have... Should have what? Stayed in your car until winter killed you? Tried to survive alone with no resources and nowhere to go? Cade's voice was sharp. This isn't your fault, Sarah. It's the fault of whoever decided that ancient bloodlines are more important than basic decency. We reached the cabin without incident. But Cade didn't leave. He checked every window, every lock, then positioned himself in the chair by the door with a knife I hadn't noticed him carrying. You don't have to stay, I said, though I was grateful he was. Yes, I do. Dominic would have my hide if anything happened to you. He tried for his usual grin, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Besides, I'm good company. I know all the best stories. Tell me about Leanna. He went still. Sage told you. She thought I should know. Cade was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the chair's arm. Leanna was... she was fierce. Strong and beautiful and absolutely fearless. She and Dominic were matched from childhood. Their families arranged it, but they actually fell in love anyway, which everyone said was lucky. He stared at the door, but I had the feeling he was seeing the past. When the Red Hawk Pack challenged for territory 5 years ago, she was supposed to stay back, protected. But during the fight, their alpha went for Dominic while he was engaged with another wolf. Leanna saw it. And she... he trailed off. She saved him. Yeah. Took the claws meant for his throat. By the time he got to her, it was too late. The wounds were too severe, even for our healing. She died in his arms. His voice roughened. He went feral after that, killed the Red Hawk Alpha with his bare hands, drove the whole pack out of the territory. It took Marcus and Matthias both to pull him back from the edge, and when he finally came back to himself, the guilt nearly destroyed him. He blamed himself for her death, for not being fast enough, strong enough, aware enough. My heart ached for the man who'd brought me food and shown me the heart tree, who carried that kind of loss like a physical weight. He's not responsible for someone else's choice. Try telling him that. Cade's expression softened. But you're different. I don't think he's letting himself acknowledge it fully yet, but we all see it. The way he looks at you isn't how he looked at Leanna. It's something else. Something that scares him, I think, because it feels like betrayal to move on. I don't want to replace her. You couldn't if you tried, but maybe that's the point. You're not supposed to replace her. You're supposed to be something new, something he didn't expect and doesn't know how to handle. Cade met my eyes. Just don't give up on him too quickly. He's worth the patience. We sat in silence after that, listening to the night sounds of the forest. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. I tried to read, but the words blurred together meaninglessly. Tried to sleep, but every sound made my heart race. Cade stayed alert, his posture never relaxing, his attention fixed on protecting me. Dawn was just beginning to lighten the sky when Dominic finally returned. I heard him before I saw him, the sound of boots on the porch, a low exchange between him and Cade. Then the door opened, and he stood there, looking exhausted and furious and relieved all at once. They're gone, he said without preamble. For now. We reinforced the patrols, set up additional watchers, but Sarah... He moved into the cabin, and Cade quietly slipped out, leaving us alone. I need to know everything about your mother's family. Every detail, no matter how small or insignificant it seems, because whoever those wolves were, they know things about your bloodline that we don't, and that makes you a target. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the cabin's warmth. I don't know much. My mother never talked about her family. I always assumed they were dead, or that she'd left on bad terms. The only thing she ever said was that her grandmother had been different, special, that she could sense things others couldn't, could talk to the forest like it was alive. Dominic went very still. What else? She said that her grandmother warned her, that the gift would skip a generation, that I might inherit it, but I never understood what she meant. I just thought it was stories, the kind parents tell children to make them feel special. It wasn't stories. He sat down heavily on the couch, scrubbing a hand over his face. Sarah, your great-grandmother was probably a bridge walker, someone born with the ability to move between the human world and ours, to speak directly to the land itself. They're incredibly rare, and most bloodlines lost the ability generations ago. But if you carry even a fraction of that power... He looked up at me. You're not just valuable. You're potentially one of the most powerful assets any pack could have. You could strengthen territory bonds, heal corrupted land, even mediate between feuding packs. In the wrong hands, you could be used as a weapon. The implications crashed over me like ice water. So what do? You stay here. You let me protect you, and you learn to control whatever abilities you have before someone else tries to control them for you. He stood, crossing to where I stood frozen by the window. I know this isn't what you signed up for when you inherited that land. I know you came here looking for shelter, not a war, but I meant what I said. I will keep you safe. Whatever it takes. The ferocity in his voice, the absolute conviction, made something in my chest crack open. This man who barely knew me, who had every reason to see me as a burden, was promising to stand between me and danger, was looking at me like I mattered, like my survival was worth fighting for. Why? The question came out barely above a whisper. Why does it matter so much to you? He was so close now I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the fine lines that spoke of hard years and harder choices. When he spoke, his voice was rough with honesty, because when you touched that heart tree, when the territory claimed you, I felt something I thought died with Lyanna. Hope. Purpose. A reason to care about tomorrow instead of just surviving until it arrives. His hand came up slowly, cupping my face with a gentleness that contradicted his fierce expression. You make me want to be more than just an alpha going through the motions. You make me want to live again. My breath caught. Dominic. I know it's too much, too fast. I know you deserve slow and careful and all the normal things I can't give you. But I've never been good at pretending, and I won't start now. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, and I felt the touch reverberate through my entire body. You're mine to protect, Sarah, not because of bloodlines or territory or ancient magic, because I choose it. Because every instinct I have says you're important, and I've learned to trust those instincts. I should have stepped back, should have insisted on boundaries, on space to think clearly. But I was so tired of being careful, of making myself small, of accepting less than what I desperately wanted. So instead, I leaned into his touch and whispered, "Then protect me. But don't ask me to hide. Don't ask me to be passive while others decide my fate." Something blazed in his eyes, pride and desire and fierce approval. I wouldn't dream of it. He stayed until full sunrise, sitting with me while I asked questions about bridgewalkers and pack politics, about the threats we might face and the allies we could count on. His presence was solid and reassuring, and when he finally left to catch a few hours of sleep before the next crisis, the cabin felt emptier than it should have. I stood at the window, watching him disappear into the forest, and realized with startling clarity that somewhere between inheriting worthless land and touching an ancient tree, between running from one life and stumbling into another, I'd stopped just surviving. I was starting to live. And whatever came next, whatever dangers lurked in the shadows, whatever challenges waited in the days ahead, I would face them standing upright, eyes open, finally brave enough to fight for something worth keeping. The weeks that followed the attack settled into a rhythm that felt both strange and comfortable. Dominic assigned rotating guards to watch my cabin, never the same wolf twice in a row, which I realized was strategic. It forced me to interact with different pack members, to learn their personalities and quirks, to become woven into the fabric of their daily lives, rather than remaining an outsider under protection. Sage began teaching me about the territory's plants, which ones healed, which ones harmed, which ones held power beyond simple medicine. We'd walk for hours through the forest, and she'd point out roots and leaves while I filled notebooks with sketches and descriptions. "Your great-grandmother would have known all this instinctively," she told me one afternoon, crouching beside a cluster of silvery mushrooms. "But knowledge can be learned, even if the instinct isn't there." Except the instinct was there, buried but emerging. I'd reach for a plant before Sage identified it, knowing somehow that it would ease fever or draw out poison. The forest whispered to me in ways I was only beginning to understand. Warnings when storms approached, awareness when predators moved through the underbrush, a sense of the pack's locations even when I couldn't see them. Dominic noticed. He noticed everything about me, actually, with an attention that should have felt invasive, but instead felt like being truly seen for the first time in my life. He'd catch me at dinner in the main hall and ask about my day, listening with genuine interest as I described the herbs Sage had shown me, or the stories Rowan had shared. He'd find excuses to walk me back to my cabin afterward, those minutes alone together charged with an awareness that grew stronger each time. We didn't talk about what he'd said that dawn morning, the confession that had hung between us like a promise. But it was there in every look, every careful touch, every moment he positioned himself between me and potential threats. Elena remained distant, but no longer openly hostile. I'd caught her watching me during a training session, where Finn was teaching me basic self-defense, and when our eyes met, she'd given a small nod. Not approval exactly, but acknowledgement. It felt like victory. 6 weeks after the northern boundary attack, Dominic found me at the Heart Tree. I'd been coming here every few days, placing my palm against the bark and feeling the territory's pulse, learning to understand the wordless communication that flowed through root and stone. I was so focused on the sensation, the pack moving through the forest like threads in a tapestry, that I didn't hear him approach. "You're getting stronger," he observed, settling beside me against the massive trunk. "Sage says I have good instincts." "Sage is being diplomatic. You have incredible instincts." He was quiet for a moment, and I felt, rather than saw him watching me. "The council met this morning. They've formally recognized you as pack, not just under my protection, but as a full member. It's unprecedented for someone who can't shift." But the vote was unanimous. I turned to look at him, stunned. Even Elena, she said, and I quote, "The territory has spoken more clearly than any of us ever could. Who are we to argue with ground that's been sacred for 1,000 years?" A smile tugged at his mouth. "I think that's the closest she'll come to admitting she was wrong." Emotion flooded through me, so intense it stole my breath. Belonging, acceptance, a place where I wasn't tolerated but wanted. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." His hand found mine, fingers threading together like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You've earned this, Sarah. The way you've learned, adapted, contributed, the pack sees your value. They see you." The way he said it made my pulse race. "And you? What do you see?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Everything. I see everything when I look at you, and it terrifies me." His thumb traced circles on my palm, the touch absent and intimate at once. "I told myself I'd give you time, space to adjust without the pressure of this, whatever this is between us. But you're in my thoughts constantly. I find excuses to be near you. I lie awake at night listening to your heartbeat 2 cabins away and telling myself I'm just being vigilant, just protecting what's mine to protect." "Dominic, I'm not finished." He turned to face me fully, and the intensity in his golden eyes stole whatever words I'd been about to say. "Lyanna's death broke something in me. I thought that part of me, the part that could bond, could love without reservation, was gone permanently. And then you walked into my territory with nothing but 6 boxes and stubborn courage. And suddenly I couldn't remember why I'd been so certain I was better off alone. My heart hammered so hard I was sure he could hear it. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I want you, not because of bloodlines or territory or ancient magic, but because you're brave and kind, and you laugh at Cade's terrible jokes. Because you treat the youngest pack members with the same respect you show Marcus. Because you've been through hell and somehow haven't let it make you cruel." He reached up, cupping my face with both hands now, holding me like I was precious. "I'm saying that if you'll have me, broken edges and difficult past and all, I'd like to stop pretending this is just about protection." The world narrowed to just us. His hands warm against my skin, his eyes searching mine for an answer I'd been holding since the moment he'd walked into that courthouse clearing. "I don't want perfect," I whispered. "I never have. I just want real. I want someone who sees me and doesn't flinch. And Dominic, you've never once looked away." Something in his expression cracked open, relief and wonder and hunger all mixed together. "Then say yes." "Yes to what?" "To this. To us. To letting me court you properly, the way you deserve. To giving this," he gestured between us, "whatever this becomes, a real chance." The smile that spread across my face felt like sunrise. "Yes." He kissed me then, and it was nothing like the careful, controlled man I'd come to know. It was raw and honest and desperate, like he'd been holding back for so long that my permission had shattered every restraint. I kissed him back just as fiercely, pouring every lonely year, every rejection, every moment of feeling invisible into showing him exactly how much I wanted this. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I'm going to do this right," he murmured. "Slowly. Properly. The pack will expect courting rituals, traditions. I don't care about traditions, I know. But I do, because you deserve every single one. He pressed a softer kiss to my forehead. Let me do this right, Sarah. Let me show you what it means to be cherished. The word echoed through me like a bell. Cherished, not tolerated, not accepted despite flaws, but cherished, chosen deliberately, wanted intentionally. We walked back to the main compound hand in hand as sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Pack members we passed smiled knowingly, and I realized they'd probably sensed the shift between us, the way the bond had solidified into something undeniable. That night, the pack gathered again, not for any formal reason, but because that's what families did. They came together, shared food and stories, celebrated small victories, and supported each other through challenges. I sat beside Dominic at the long table, his hand resting on my lower back, and listened to Cade dramatically recount a hunting mishap that had everyone laughing. This was belonging. This was home. Later, as Dominic walked me back to my cabin, under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch, I thought about the girl who'd sat in that courthouse 6 weeks ago, convinced she'd inherited nothing. How wrong Eleanor had been. How wrong I'd been. I'd inherited everything that mattered. A place to belong, people who valued me, and a future that stretched out full of possibility instead of just survival. "What are you thinking?" Dominic asked, his arm around my shoulders. That my father's last gift wasn't cruel after all. It was the kindest thing he ever did for me. I looked up at this fierce, complicated man, who'd somehow become my safe harbor. He sent me exactly where I needed to be. Dominic's answering smile was soft with understanding. Then I owe Richard Hartley a debt I can never repay. He kissed me goodnight on my porch, sweet and lingering, then waited until I was safely inside before disappearing into the forest. Through the window, I watched his silhouette merge with shadows, and felt the territory's awareness wrap around me like a blanket. The pack settling for the night, the forest keeping watch, Dominic's presence a steady warmth at the edge of my consciousness. I'd come here with nothing, and found everything. Found purpose in learning, found strength in vulnerability. Found love in the last place I'd ever expected to look. The deed that had seemed like a final rejection had actually been a key, unlocking a future my mother had somehow known waited for me. A destiny written in bloodlines and old magic, and the simple, profound truth that sometimes the things we think we've lost lead us exactly where we're meant to be. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face and woke to sunlight streaming through windows, to the sound of wolves calling in the distance, to the certain knowledge that I was finally, impossibly, completely home.